Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Could you introduce yourself to the jury and give us your name, please?
I'm Christina Pursley. I work for the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's Office.
All right. Now, Ms. Pursley, what is your role with the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's Office?
I'm a forensic technician. That means that I help our pathologists with autopsies, and I also specialize in skeletal remains.
All right. So, how long have you worked with a medical examiner here at Gwinnett?
Just over 4 years.
Prior to working with Gwinnett's medical examiner, did you have any other experience in this field?
I did not. I went to school for anthropology, but other than that, I did not have any experience.
And that was going to be the next thing we talked about. So, in order to, what's your official title with the medical examiner's office?
Forensic technician.
All right. In order to be a forensic technician with the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's Office, what kind of education or training have you gone through?
We do continuing education. Most of our training is hands-on. That means that even if we don't have experience outside of doing autopsies, our pathologists will train us. We also attend classes every year. I think that we do a class at least once a month. And then whatever research that we do outside of that is we can do it on our own as well.
You said you went to school for anthropology.
Yes.
And can you tell us what that is?
So anthropology is the study of human remains, of skeletal human remains. In the field that I studied in, there's a broader anthropology field that is cultural, biological, but I specifically studied human remains.
Okay. And in terms of studying human remains, what do you do as a part of the medical examiner's office when it comes to examining human remains?
So if a person is recently deceased, I help with the autopsy. If someone has been deceased for a while and they are skeletal remains, I'll respond to the scene with our investigators. I'll process the scene with our investigators, which, depending on how the remains are found, it could look like a few different things. In most cases, when people are skeletal and they're found somewhere, usually they're not buried, they're on top of the surface, so that means that we have to search a broader area to make sure that we are recovering the entire person.
All right. Now, in your role over the last 4 years with the medical examiner's office, how many cases have you been involved in recovering human remains?
In recovering human remains, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. It's been a few, though.
All right. Now, just to give us an idea, I don't need an exact number, more than 10, more than 50, more than 100?
Probably less than 10, between 5 and 10.
Okay. Now, when I say human remains, are we talking about, and I asked you that question, but the answer to that question, are you talking about skeletal remains?
Yes.
Okay.
For the majority of the scenes that I will respond to, usually they're always skeletal remains.
Is that why you respond to a scene essentially with the medical examiner's office, because you have a specialty in
Yes.
human remains?
Yes.
Okay. And skeletal remains, to be more specific?
Yes.
Okay. In college, when you studied anthropology, did you have any involvement there with on-scene or any kind of internships there involving human remains or skeletal remains?
I did not, because the program at the time, I mean, this is years ago, the program at the time did not have a specific course for human remains in a forensic setting, so I did not do any kind of human remains excavations in college. I did participate in excavations, but they were usually cultural excavations.
Understood. Now, are there, in order to be a forensic technician, is there any particular certifications or things like that that you have to have?
Just a bachelor's degree.
All right. Now, while working for the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner, who is it that you work for? Who is your medical examiner?
Dr. Carol Terry.
And has she been the medical examiner for the entire time that you worked there at the office?
Yes, we do have a part-time pathologist that will come in occasionally, but for the majority of the time I work for Carol Terry.
All right. Now, I want to take you to the evening hours of February 6th of 2023. Did you participate with the medical examiner's office in responding to a scene for human remains?
Yes, I did.
All right. Describe that to us.
So I'd gotten a call. I think I had just gotten home from work, actually, and taken my scrubs off and got the call that there were possible human remains that were found, skeletal human remains. So I drove out there. We were losing light by that point. So the recovery was pretty quick. I think we spent about an hour and a half at the scene that night. We recovered the majority of what was found, a lot of the larger bones. We had to secure the scene for the night because we couldn't, I mean, by the time we left, it was nearing 10 p.m. and it was during winter, so we had literally no light. So we had to secure the scene for the night, and we went back out the next morning.
Are there challenges that you face in a case where the remains are completely skeletal versus there's some amount of tissue or flesh that remains on a body?
Yes, so with skeletal remains, unless there's some kind of like sharp force or blunt force trauma, it can be hard to determine a cause of death, especially if the entirety of the person is not recovered. Other challenges could be animal activity taking away part of the decedent, taking bones away, also causing trauma themselves post-mortem, like, for instance, rodents or dogs, sometimes coyotes will get a hold of the bones and carry them away and kind of gnaw on them, and that can cause physical trauma to the bones that has nothing to do with the cause of death.
Now, because of, in this case, the remains, and we're going to get to some photographs here in a moment, but the remains that you recovered that evening or were a part of recovering that evening, how would you classify them in terms of the skeletonization of the bones? Was there any apparent flesh tissue that remained there on the bones?
There was not. It was completely skeletal. There was no tissue, which led us to believe that the remains had been there for quite some time.
Do you have, what is the science behind being able to determine that?
For time of death?
Yes, ma'am. When you find remains that are completely skeletal, how do you go about determining, if you can, how long they've been there?
It depends on the environment. For someone that is outside and fully skeletal, we'll look at the condition of the bones, look for any kind of soft tissue that may be present, look for bleaching on the bones if they had been exposed to sunlight for a long time, if they've been exposed to a lot of moisture. We can see signs in the bones of that. For most skeletal remains that we find that have been there for quite some time, they'll show the bleaching from the sun, they'll show some kind of weathering, and with remains that have not been there for so long, usually we expect to see some kind of soft tissue, and yeah, some kind of soft tissue.
I understand. Is there a difference in what you might find in skeletal remains if the person was buried versus not buried?
Yes, there is a difference. Like I talked about with the bleaching in the sun, someone who is not buried will typically have some kind of bleaching, which bleaching just makes the bones a little bit whiter. With someone that's buried, we would expect to see, for someone that's been there for a while, some kind of plant growth, some kind of, maybe some soft tissue left, maybe some adipocere, which is kind of like a waxy, I don't want to say substance, but it's like a waxy texture that tissue that's been exposed to moisture for a long time will kind of turn into.
Okay. Now, I want to take you to, generally, when you respond to a scene involving human remains, what are the processes or procedures that you go through in recovering those remains?
So what we do is we have what we call a dig kit. That's pretty much all the tools that we would need to be able to do a recovery of skeletal remains. And that includes small shovels, brushes, flags so that we can mark out where we're going to be excavating. It also includes measurement tools so that we can tell how deep the remains are recovered, also how far away from different points in the landscape that they're recovered. So what we would do is we would take the dig kit out, we would map out where we would like to do the excavation, and then we would start around where the remains are usually found within a couple of feet, and then we'll expand that area further out, especially if we see signs of animal activity or any kind of weathering that would carry the bones away to a further location.
Now, when you arrived on scene that night, February 6th, 2023, did you have a dig kit that you were just describing?
I did not because, like I said, I had just gotten home, so I didn't have time to go to the office to be able to get the dig kit. Luckily, CSI had already mapped it out for us, and so we just gathered the surface remains that we could find with the daylight that we had left.
And in terms of the skeletal remains there that you observed, can you give us a general idea of how much of the remains were present?
I would say, based on the first night, we found probably about 85% of the remains.
And I'm going to, may I approach you?
Sure.
I'm going to show you what is marked as States Exhibits 13 through 13.13. If you would, Ms. Pursley, if you will look through those and let me know once you've finished looking through them if you recognize what those are.
I do recognize them. They are photos of the scene from the first night of recovery.
Do those photographs accurately depict the scene that you described on February 6th of 2023?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, I'd move to admit States Exhibits 13 through 13.13 into evidence.
No objection.
States Exhibit 13, 13.1 through 13.13 are admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish?
Yes.
All right. If you would bring up number 13, we'll walk through.
And you have a screen here also.
There's one to your right, one to your left. Yeah. So whatever's easiest for you to look at is okay.
Okay.
This is States Exhibit number 13, I believe. I'm going to walk up here and see it. Yes, 13.
Could you see it? You can see it. Okay.
All right. Ms. Pursley, describe for us what we're looking at here in this photograph.
This is a view from the side of the road. 316 is the road, kind of looking to the side of where the scene was.
And if you recall, from this perspective, where were the remains at from here?
If you're standing and looking this way, they would have been to the right and up an embankment.
All right. So on the right side of this photograph here, is that the embankment you're talking about?
Yes.
Describe for us, if you can remember, how steep was that?
It was in parts pretty steep. There was a road that was to the side of it, which is how we accessed the scene to begin with. But it was pretty steep right there if you're looking at that particular part of it.
All right. Can we go to 13.1, please? All right. And again, what are we looking at here?
This is also a photo of the embankment leading up to the scene.
All right. Now, as we're looking at this into the woods here, did the woods continue all the way back to where the remains were?
Yes.
All right. Can we go to 13.2? All right. And here, this photograph, that was 13.1, I believe. And then it goes to 13.2, yes. What are we looking at here?
This is also the side of the scene from the road, also a photograph of the embankment.
And this one, is it taken kind of in the reverse of the first photograph, looking back the opposite direction?
It is.
Okay. If we can go to the next photograph. All right, and what are we looking at here?
This is a portion of the scene. This is pretty far from where the remains were actually found. Probably after we secured the scene for the night, or pretty close to securing the scene for the night.
All right, and the next photograph? All right, what are we looking at here?
That is a femur. I'm not sure which side, just looking at the photograph. That femur in particular was carried a little bit away from where the majority of the remains were found, indicating that there was probably some animal activity.
All right, and And you've explained that, I think, before. This is Exhibit 13.4. But when you're involved in the recovery of human remains that are skeletal, do you often see bones being moved out from the general location?
Yes, especially if they're, I don't want to say dumped, but if they're placed on top of the surface and they're not buried where they can be easily accessed by animals. Yes, it's pretty common to see animals take some bones and kind of scatter them.
In this particular case, when finding a bone, the femur like this, did it appear to you that that was the case, that an animal might have carried it away from the main area?
Yes.
Okay. We can go to the next photograph, 13.5. All right, and what are we looking at here?
That's a photograph of a skull.
All right. Was this part of the remains that you recovered that evening?
Yes.
Okay. And 13.6. All right, what are we looking at here?
That's a sacrum, which is your tailbone.
All right. The next photograph. All right, and this one's 13.7. Make sure I'm right. 13.7. What are we looking at here?
That's also a photograph, an up-close photograph of the skull that was found. And that's a photograph of how the skull was found before it was manipulated by any investigators.
All right. The next photograph, 13.8. And what are we looking at here?
That's part of the pelvis.
All right. And in terms of recovering remains, is there a significance in certain bones and identifying who the person is?
Yes. So there are a few bones that we use in particular to identify age and sex. The pelvis is one of them. We use the pelvis to determine whether someone is male or female. We also determine age by the pelvis. The femur is another bone that we use to determine age as well as height, possibly.
And the last part there, the height part, makes sense to me, because I imagine the length of the bone
Exactly.
determines height. But you've also mentioned determining gender, male or female, in terms of the pelvis. What kind of things do you find with the pelvis?
So with the female pelvis, the opening will be a little bit broader than with a male. It's also because, females are built and designed to give childbirth. As far as age goes, there are parts of the pelvis that we can tell if it's fused or not, which will tell us if somebody is a child, a teenager, or an adult.
Now, just in a little bit further explanation about that, what would you expect to see in a child or prepubescent adult versus, or a prepubescent person versus somebody who's already gone through puberty or older?
I would expect to see that not all of the plates are fused.
Okay. So as somebody gets older, do their plates fuse together?
Yes.
Okay. And to the next photograph. All right. And what are we looking at in this one?
This is a human skull, again, before manipulation by investigators.
All right. And this is 13.9. Can we go to 13.10? What are we looking at here?
That is the pelvis with the sacrum in place. I believe that's Dr. Terry that's holding it together.
Okay. So she's holding it together. Were these found in separate pieces?
They were found in separate pieces. She put them back together, and I believe we sent that same photograph to our consulting forensic anthropologist to help determine age and sex.
Okay. To the next photograph. And what are we looking at here?
That's a mandibrium. That's part of the interior part of your rib cage.
Okay. And to the next, this one, hold on, this one is 13.11, just so I can, for the record. The next one, 13.12. All right, and in this photograph, what do we see?
That is a photograph of where the majority of the remains were found. That's the original location that they would have been placed.
Okay. Now, what tells you that?
Well, mostly because the majority of the remains were found there. The skull, I believe, was found closer to that person's foot, to the left of the photograph. And as you can see, they're not buried. They're a little bit covered with some dirt and some plant matter, but that's probably from weathering, not from intentional burying.
Okay, and that was going to be the next question here. In looking at these remains, did you discover any evidence that they had, that the body had been concealed in any way or buried, covered up with anything?
Concealed only due to the circumstances of They were found in the woods, but they did not appear to be buried, no.
Okay. And to the last photograph, 13/2013. And what are we looking at here?
Those are fingernails with some black nail polish.
All right. And where were those recovered at?
Those were recovered at the original location where the majority of the remains were located.
So in that previous photograph in 13.12 that we just looked at, these were located in that area?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you are out there and these remains are being recovered, how do you document or preserve the remains? What happens once you're out there looking at collecting these bones?
So what I will do is take a notepad with me that I don't mind getting dirty, and I will write down every location of every bone that's found, where it's found in proximity to, say, a tree or some other landmark. So we'll measure it out and figure out where the closest landmark is. We'll also document how deep it's found within the ground so that we can determine whether or not it's a clandestine grave or scattered remains. And we'll also photograph every step of the way. Everything that we remove, we'll photograph a bone before it's removed, where it's originally located. We'll photograph it after it's removed.
Okay. Now, when you recover remains, once you've documented and done the photographic work and writing all of the stuff down, where do you take them? Where do you take the remains?
So usually I'll take custody of the remains and transport them myself. So what I'll do is place them in a bag, mark the bag of where the remains were located, what remains are inside, and then I will take them to the medical examiner's office to be processed. And what that looks like is I bring them into the medical examiner's office, into the forensic wing, to the morgue portion. I'll write down and document everything that is brought in to make sure that nothing is lost along the way, that nothing is misplaced, not tampered with, and then they're placed into a locked cooler.
In this particular case, do you recall how many members or what staff from the medical examiner's office was all present that night?
The original night, it was myself, Dr. Terry, and I believe two other investigators.
All right. From the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall all of the bones that you recovered that night?
I can try.
I have a copy of your report if you don't recall all of them, and I can show it to you.
Okay. I believe that we recovered both humeri, both ulna, both radiuses, the mandibrium, I think all of the ribs, the sacrum, the pelvis, the skull, the mandible, the femurs, both of them, the tibia, fibula, and we may have recovered a couple of smaller foot bones that night, but the majority of the hand and foot bones were found the following day.
Okay. Now, you've used a lot of words that I knew some of them, not all of them, but I want to ask you about a few of them.
Okay.
So you've already talked about the pelvis and the sacrum, so I described what those are. There's a term you use, the manubrium.
Yes.
Manubrium, okay. What is that?
So that's a part of the anterior ribs. It's close to where your sternum would be.
All right. And then you used, I think, humerus.
Yes.
Which bone is that?
Those are your upper arm bones.
All right. And the radius and ulna, I'm going back to 8th grade here, trying to remember the anatomy, but the radius and ulna.
Those are your lower arm bones.
Arm bones, okay. So, in essence, did y'all recover all of the arm bones in the skeletal remains?
Yes, all of the arm bones and all of the leg bones were recovered the first night.
All right, so that's the femur that you talked about,
Yes.
And then the tibia and fibia?
Yes.
Okay, so apart from that, you also recovered the skull and ribs, you said?
Yes.
Now, do you know if you recovered all the ribs or?
We did. We also recovered the clavicles and the scapulas.
All right. Clavicle, is that the collarbone?
Yes.
All right. And scapula, you're going to have to remind me.
Those are your shoulder blades.
Shoulder blades, all right. Any other significant bones that you recovered that night?
The mandible is a big one because a lot of times with skeletal remains, sometimes the mandible will be carried away and it's not easily found, but it was with the rest of the skull, which was
Is that the jawbone?
It is,
The
yes.
jawbone, okay.
Your lower jawbone, yeah.
Lower jawbone. So in this particular, in the remains that you recovered, you recovered the mandible, was it still attached to the skull or was it somewhere else?
It was not attached because there wasn't any soft tissue present to keep it attached, but it was with the skull.
Okay. And then essentially the backbone, the vertebrae, the lumbars, did you recover all of the spine?
We did. We covered every vertebrae, I believe.
All right. You then took those, bagged them individually, and took them back to the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
What normally, when they go back to the medical examiner's office, what occurs to those remains?
So they will remain in their original bag so that they can be dictated the next day during autopsy by Dr. Terry. I fill out paperwork, document everything that I did, place those same bags into a locked cooler that only medical examiner employees have access to.
All right. Now, and you mentioned obviously it got too dark that night to really continue and search. Were you a part of the medical examiner's team that came back the following day?
Yes.
All right. Who came back the following day with you, if you recall?
My supervisor, Tina Miller, came. Dr. Terry did not go that day. I believe we had 3 other investigators that came, and our other forensic technician came with us to help. And the reason why so many of us went back the next day was because we were trying to recover the hyoid bone, which is really important in skeletal remains to help determine cause of death. It doesn't always determine cause of death, but it can certainly help.
In what way? Describe what the hyoid bone is and how it might assist.
So the hyoid bone is in your throat, it's in your neck. And in some suspected homicide cases where we suspect that there is strangulation, especially with manual or ligature strangulation, the hyoid bone can become broken or bruised during that process. Unfortunately, with skeletal remains, a hyoid bone is a really soft bone, and animals, unfortunately, really like soft bones, so it can be hard to recover in remains that are exposed to the elements and exposed to animal activity.
So you mentioned that the next day, more personnel from the medical examiner's office showed up for the purpose of trying to locate that. More remains, but with a particular focus on that bone?
Yes.
Okay. And what did y'all do when you got back the next day? What kind of things did you do once you got there in order to search the next day?
So because we knew that we were looking for smaller bones, we had already recovered most of the larger long bones. We used what we call a sifter, which is basically, if you've ever seen any kind of like anthropology shows, they usually have, it's a classic, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's got like a screen at the bottom and then it's like a box built around it. And what we do is take the soil or the dirt and the leaves, dump it into there and then shake it so that the dirt falls through and it'll trap any kind of larger pieces like rocks, potentially a bullet, and some bones.
Now, when, and y'all employed using those the following day?
Yes, and we also used brushes to make sure that when we were digging through the dirt that we weren't, because the hyoid bone is such a soft bone, that we weren't damaging the bones by using shovels, so we mainly just used our hands and we used brushes.
If you recall, and just approximately, how long were you and the rest of the medical examiner's team out the following day?
The following day, I believe we probably left about 3 p.m. We had gotten there about 10 a.m., so we were out there most of the day.
All right. Now, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 14, 14.1 through 14.15, I believe. Make sure I'm correct. And then also, because we've already admitted some, and we're a little out of order, 14.23 through 14.32 for the record. So that's 14 and 14.1 through 14.15 and 14.23 through 14.32. And like I did just a moment ago, I'm going to keep them in separate stacks since there's a little bit of gap, but if you'll look through these photographs, let me know if you recognize what's contained in them.
I recognize these as photographs of the scene from the second day.
All right, February 7th of 2023? Are they fair and accurate representations of that scene on that day?
Yes, they are.
Judge, I'd move to admit States Exhibits 14 and 14.1 through 14.15 and 14.22?
23.
23, excuse me, through 14.32.
No objection.
Okay, State's Exhibit 14, 14.1 through 14.15 are admitted without objection. And then for State's Exhibit 14.23 through 14.32 are admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Percy, before you came into the courtroom, the missing exhibits and the numbers there, 14.16 through 14.22, have already been admitted to evidence, but I'm going to show them to you as well. Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I recognize these from the second day.
All right. And generally, the stack that I just handed you, the 14.15 through 14.22, what are they of?
They are photographs of a Glock handgun that was found in sort of close proximity to the remains.
You were there that day when it was recovered?
Yes.
Okay. If I can, I'm going to go ahead and publish, starting with exhibit number 14. Here, no, it'll come up on the screen. All right, now, February 7th, 2023, it's daylight hours. What are we looking at here?
This is a photograph during the day, as you said, of the side of the scene, looking up the embankment from the side of the road.
All right, and to the next photograph. All right, and what are we looking at here in 14.1?
A different area of the side of the scene.
All right, and to the next photo. All right, and here.
This is just outside the perimeter of the scene.
All right, and I'm going to be accurate here, 14.2. To the next photograph, 14.3. What are we looking at here?
Members of the Gwinnett County Police Department, possibly recruits. They had done a grid search during the day.
All right, so the folks here that are in the photograph, members of the Gwinnett County Police Department, these were the individuals who were involved in conducting a grid search through the woods?
Yes.
Okay. Did you participate in the grid search?
I did not. We focused our efforts on where the remains were found.
For the next photograph, 14.4. What are we looking at here?
This is the outside perimeter of the scene.
All right, and 14.5. All right, what are we looking at here?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure we've recovered something there, but I can't quite see it.
All right, well, in here, this little orange flag, if you will, or indicator here, what is this an indicator of?
That is usually an indicator that we did find something. But again, I'm not entirely sure from this photograph what we recovered.
Whatever y'all found there, you had already collected the previous night, and this is a photograph of it?
We may have, yes.
Okay. To the next photograph. All right, and generally what are we looking at here?
Another photograph of where we recovered something.
Okay, and the next photograph?
Again, we have recovered something from that spot, and I can see that we had dug around that spot, so I'm assuming that we had probably found a long bone the previous night.
All right, and the next one? All right, and what are we looking at here?
That looks like the main area where we excavated the majority of the remains.
Now, you mentioned using, I don't remember what you called it, it wasn't a screen, you called it
A sifter.
A sifter, thank you. Were you, in doing that, were you taking, the dirt or pine straw or whatever it is that we can see in photographs like this and putting it through that sifter?
Yes.
Okay. To the next photograph. This is 14.9. All right. What are we looking at here?
This is an overview of where the majority of the remains were found after excavation.
Okay. And the next photograph. All right, what are we looking at here?
That looks like it's either a bone from a foot or a hand. I'm going to assume a foot because the majority of the hand bones were found relatively close together in the position that the hands were laid.
Okay. This photograph here was taken on February 7th, the next morning.
Yes, it was.
Is this an example of some of the additional bones that you found the next day?
Yes.
And do you recall, without looking at your report, I have it here if you need it, which bones, what all you found the following day?
We found the majority of the hand and foot bones. There were a few that we did not recover. I think that's the majority of the bones that we recovered. We did recover some hair, additional fingernails, and some possible rib cartilage.
Okay. Now, the hair, do you recall finding the hair?
I do, yes.
In terms of when you found it, were you able to tell anything unique about the hair?
Yes, we were able to tell that it was had two different tones to it. There was a dark tone and a light tone.
Okay. Now, is that the hair having two different colorings to it? Is that an indication of something natural happening to it, or is the hair that color prior to death?
It could have been something natural, like the sun could have bleached it, but looking at it, it didn't look like anything like relative to weathering or bleaching. It looked like it had been previously colored.
Okay. And to the next photograph, which would be 14.11. All right. And what are we looking at here?
It looks like possibly a metacarpal from the foot.
Okay, metacarpal.
It's a tiny little bone that's in your foot.
A small foot bone.
Yes, exactly.
There's obviously what appears to be a ruler here. What's the purpose of that?
We use the L scale to not only show what the size of something is, but show the relative, like basically to show size.
Okay. And the next photograph, 14.12. All right, and you know what we're looking at here?
I believe that's either the rib cartilage or it possibly could be part of the knee.
Okay. Again, y'all are measuring it for scale?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next photograph, 14.13. All right, and what are we looking at here?
That looks like it's the majority of a hand, I believe.
Okay. Now, in relation, and we looked at a few bones that might have been the foot bones and then this hand bone. In relation to that bigger scene that we were just looking at where y'all were excavating and found the skull and the rest of the, where was this located at?
This was located with the majority of the bones. It looked like the way that the remains had been laid, that the hands were to the side because we found bones from both hands and they were on either side of the midsection of the remains.
Okay. And the next photograph, 14.14. What are we looking at here?
Again, that's going to be either a foot bone or a hand bone.
And the next photograph, 14.15. All right, and what are we looking at here?
This is part of the scene. I think that's members of Gwinnett County Police.
14.16 all the way to 14.23. While they're putting that up, I wanted to ask you, if you recall, how many bones were recovered not in the main area with skeletal remains, but were we looked at one femur that you had talked about,
Yes.
but what else, if you recall, was located elsewhere?
I believe that one of the fibulas and tibias was found further away from the remains, and I believe a humerus was found further away from the remains, but that was essentially, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, the majority of it was found further away from the remains.
All right. In this photograph, what are we looking at?
This
Is it
is,
a tooth?
I don't think it's a tooth. I believe it's a bone. It may be part of the knee, but it's definitely not a tooth.
Okay, and to the next photograph, 14.24.
I believe that's the same bone from the previous picture with the scale, yeah.
Okay. The next photograph. And what are we looking at here?
Another foot or hand bone.
All right, and the next photograph. Same thing with the scale.
Yes, probably a hand bone, judging by the length of it.
All right, it's 14.26. The next photograph, 14.27. All right, what are we looking at here?
Those, I believe, are going to be hand bones.
All right, and you located these on either side of the torso, you had said?
Yes.
All right, 14.28. And that's the same one, just with the scale on it?
Yes.
Okay, and then 14.29. What are we looking at here?
That is a fingernail with black nail polish.
Okay, so you found an additional fingernail the next day?
Yes.
Okay. 14.30. The same fingernail, just with the scale on it?
Yes.
All right, and 14.31. All right, just generally what we're looking at here.
That's just an overview of where some of the remains were recovered.
All right, 14.32. All right, and what are we looking at here?
That is an overview of the majority of the site where the remains were found.
Now, obviously, it appears to me like a significant disturbance here. I mean, is this after?
That's that. Yes.
All right, so this is post search by the medical examiner's office.
Yes.
And so all of what we see kind of torn up here is stuff that you guys had gone through and sifted through looking.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And to the last, this is the last one, 14.32. All right.
Yes.
In all of the searching that you did there, both the first night and then also on the second morning, February 7th, did you locate the hyoid bone?
We did not.
Okay. From your observation, I know you're not a forensic pathologist. You don't perform the autopsies. Do you assist in performing them?
I do. I do the evisceration, which is essentially taking out the organs, weighing them, and then Dr. Terry is responsible for doing the dissection of the organs.
Understood. In a case like this, where it's skeletal and the organs are not present, do you participate in an autopsy of those?
Yes, we do still call it an autopsy. However, it's different because there are no soft tissues or organs present. So for skeletal remains, what we will do is lay them out in anatomical order, make sure everything that is there and see what kind of recovery we have. If we have a partial recovery, if we have a full recovery, we check every single bone for any signs of trauma, any signs of disease, or any signs of issues, essentially.
And I understand, as the forensic technician, you are not the individual who makes conclusions about causes of death and things like that, right?
Right.
However, from your observation of the remains, did you notice anything that appeared to be an obvious sign of trauma to any of the bones?
I did not.
Okay. Once you finished that day recovering the remainder of the bones, I think you said mostly the hand bones and foot bones, and what did you do with those remains?
Those remains were treated similarly to the ones from the night before. They were bagged, labeled, taken back to the medical examiner's office by myself, and placed into a locked cooler.
Okay. Now, that's February 7th. Did you participate in whatever autopsy could be done with Dr. Terry of these remains?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall what day or how long after that autopsy occurred?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe it was February 8th. We may have started February 7th that night, but I don't recall exactly.
Was it shortly after the remains were recovered?
It was, yes.
And what was your role in that particular autopsy?
My role was helping Dr. Terry check for trauma, laying everything out in anatomical order, and making sure that they were clean. That's part of our job, is cleaning the bones to make sure that we're not missing anything, such as a small scratch or nick, I guess I should say, from a tool or something like that.
Okay. Firstly, I think those are all the questions I have for you at this time. Thank you.
Your Honor, I know that I handled whether or not to object, but I was hoping that Mr. Dobbins could do cross.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I don't believe we've met. My name's Kyle Dobbins. I represent the defendant. You have named out a pretty significant list of bones that were recovered, and then you have said that the hyoid bone was not recovered. Were there other bones not recovered?
There were a few, I believe, a few hand and foot bones that were not recovered.
Do you know if the patella or the kneecaps were recovered?
I don't recall, honestly.
Is there anything significant about the hand or foot bones not being recovered?
There is not. It's not uncommon for such small bones to not be with the rest of the remains.
Okay. What would you attribute that to?
Either animal activity, weathering, or we just didn't. They're so small that we just didn't catch it, even though we did a thorough search.
The hyoid bone being missing, would you attribute that to animal activity or foul play?
Animal activity for sure.
As far as the gun that was located, do you know how far away that was from the remains?
I know that it was in close proximity, but I don't recall exactly how far it was found. For our investigation, it wasn't significant, so we did not measure from the remains to the gun.
I need one more.
Sure.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the state?
Nothing else from the state.
Okay, all right, Ms. Drake, maybe or
No,
Mr.
she can be excused.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Does the jury need a break now, or you want to start on the next witness? Y'all been going about an hour and 10 minutes. It seems like nobody wants a break. Okay.